I'm Richard.
And I'm Will.
And together we're
The Irreverent Nerds. Bum, bum, bum.
Hey, nerds. So, welcome to this week's episode of the Irreverent Nerds podcast. So, my co-host Will was unable to join us this week. He sends his apologies. He had some family commitments that he had to take care of. But with me, I have two very special guests, Lars Scenza and Brandon Leyva. Did I say that right, Brandon? Brandon
Leyva? Perfectly, yeah.
Awesome. I see that you ask him if you say it right.
Oh,
you did say my name right, which is awesome.
Oh, that's good.
I thought that's hilarious. That the one that phonetically spelled you asked. Okay.
No one ever gets my name right, though. That was crazy. You got it right.
Nice. Hey, let's see. I'm going to attribute that to first grade phonics. So,
yeah.
I tell you, man, like phonics is good stuff. Like it gives you a good start in life. But
yeah, if we only had that when I was in elementary school, my goodness, I think I'd speak a lot better than I do now, and I wouldn't graduate.
Oh man.
Well, thank you very much for having us on. It's fantastic to be able to have a community where you can go on and do these kinds of shows with people. I've been in the podcasting business in one form or another for probably about the last 11 or 12 years. So being able to actually meet new people, use the internet for one of its main purposes, which was to have that global community, has been fantastic. So thank you very much for having us on.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And nerds, for those of you who've been following along with the podcast, you probably remember that Lars Scenza was our very first monthly supporter. So thank you once again, Lars, for that. And he's just been a big encouragement over the last couple of months as we've got connected over Instagram. We've just been, shooting the shit and talking about podcasting, kind of the technical details of all that. So that's been fun. It's been good to get to know you, Lars, and now Brandon as well. So, yeah, tell me a bit more about you guys, about Red Shirt Geeks and about Treknicity podcast and how you all got connected and all that. Like, whatever order y'all want to go in.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Brandon is the latecomer to the group, so I'll save him having to to give too much of a breakdown. But I guess let me start with as we were sort of talking before the episode started. I moved back to the United States from New Zealand after being away for many years, and I had reconnected with my childhood best friend, who we had always done like creative things when we were in high school. We had done our own version of a quote unquote podcast. And we just knew that the best thing was to get back into it and to do that sort of stuff again. And all right, we got a special guest.
We got another special guest. My daughter is a regular on the podcast, so
as she should be, so that you can use this in the future and just show her. See, Dad had you right here from the beginning. When she's famous, I'd be like, this is where it all started. Your dad talking to a bunch of nerds.
Nerds are gonna rule the world, So
they already
are. I know, yeah. Bill Gates, Elon Musk, all those guys.
Yeah, for sure. We kind of had done this thing where we were like, we know we need to do something, and the technology that was required to do an audio-based podcast at the time was now becoming a lot more easily accessible. In fact, back then, we didn't have things like Zoom, or I think Skype was barely a thing, but luckily we lived in the same small town together, and I was able to just walk a couple blocks down to his house, and we slapped on the computer. He recorded everything in Audacity, and then he kind of edited it all together because I tend to say a lot, and yeah, so that's where we started, and from there, we had a lot of fun. We actually took that and moved it into a video based sort of podcast where we did this silly little show called I Tech You Listen, and then I made this resoundingly horrible choice and went to film school. But by doing so, it kind of got me into the mindset that, we can't keep doing it as the two of us, just the two of us, if we want to do more important things or bigger projects. So we decided, well, okay, let's bring in a third person. And we knew that by bringing in a third person, the original podcast, which was called 3x2, could no longer be called 3x2 and 3x3 just sounded silly. So that was where the name, the Red Shirt Geeks, was born. July 21st, 2014 was when we launched our website and the group. And the whole idea behind the Red Shirt Geeks was not just doing bigger projects with more people. It was allowing us to build a community with like-minded people. That has always been my forte, is working with larger groups or working with groups of people and having that collaborative environment. So we had the Red Shirt Geeks with a handful of people. We had a website, we had a podcast. We did our first we did a 48-hour film festival challenge together, which was our first video. Please do not go look at our website and watch that.
Oh, you should see some of my early ones.
Oh yes, well we have that movie has been colloquially dubbed the Mormon marriage video. And if you ever go to our website and watch it, it's the very first video in our YouTube video library. You'll see why. But yeah, I mean, and it's been this whole thing where I've always wanted to be a creator. I wanted to share my love for all things geek with as many people as I could, because I just wanted to connect with as many people as possible. And as it happens, life gets in the way. You get married, you get divorced, you have children, you move, you travel, you do things. And so the Red Shirt Geeks kind of just floated for a few years. We just did little bits here and there. And it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles that I kind of picked the mantle back up and decided that, you know what? I want to do a show all about Star Trek. I just wanted all of it to be about Star Trek because that was my thing. I'd always grown up with it. It is still my favorite franchise. And I came up with the idea for Treknicity, which initially was just going to be a talking head video where pretty much like I'm doing right now. I sit here, talk at the camera about whatever I want to talk about regarding Star Trek. And as life happens, it gets in the way. Things happen. You move, you change jobs, all sorts of stuff happen. You get remarried and you move north of Los Angeles. And that being said, I had just kind of let Treknicity float. Just sort of, I figured I'd pick it up when it was the right time to do so. And then I met this schmuck here, and we worked together for a few months. And like from day one, I knew I was like, this guy is a Star Trek nerd. He has dyed in the wool like me. I've got to get this guy to work with me. And bam.
It was like instantly became friends and instantly bonded over Star Trek.
Oh man, it brings so many people together. And Brandon, I couldn't help but notice, and you may get this a lot, you bear a certain passing resemblance to the boy, Will Wheaton. Have you ever gotten that?
Not Will Wheaton, but I used to be a lot heavier, and people used to think that I was Kevin Smith.
I would say it's the beard.
I've gotten Zach Galifianakis a few times.
That's a good one.
I get it, yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, and believe it or not, he actually is from just up the road from where I live. So he's got a house about 45 minutes from here.
That's nice.
But yeah, no, it is kind of funny. But
yeah, I am a giant Will Wheaton fan, though.
Oh yeah, he's really cool. Like I follow him on the IG, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can't say Instagram anymore.
Can you not? It's Meta now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Brought to you by Meta.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I still struggle with how simple things have changed in the course of the internet's development, especially with social media. Before there really was social media, we had instant messengers, we had MSN Messenger, you had Yahoo
AOL.
Messenger, you had AOL, you had ICQ.
ICQ. I loved ICQ.
And I was a Yahoo man myself.
And we, whenever we wanted to express an emotion, we used a wonderful combination of keys known as an emoticon. And then for some reason they just started calling it emojis, and I'm like,
that sounds much less cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it was like, is that just they just shorten it because they shorten everything? And then I realized, it was like I was like today years old, and I realized they're two very different things. And emoticon still exists, because sometimes you sit there when instead of putting an emoji in a text or a DM or whatever, or in a post, you actually put, the colon with the closed bracket for a smile, as opposed to choosing that graphical smile emoji. So, I'm probably showing my age here, but
same me. I still do it the old school way, just like you said, semicolon, parenthesis, or bracket.
Me too. I'm a child of the 80s, like a millennial, just barely a millennial. Mm-hmm. So like email was the shit back when I was, when I was a teenager. Like that was the thing. It's like, oh, I can email so and so.
I could go on and on about what it was like having my first AOL email account, and how exciting it was to come home from work in the afternoon, dial in and log on, and suddenly hear that you've got mail. Wow, I've got mail. Somebody likes me. No, not right.
And then it was just grandpa sending you racist jokes.
Yes. Oh. Yes, it was. Oh my goodness. But so we kind of did I got back into doing the whole Treknicity thing because I met Brandon. I knew that there was somebody who I could bounce off of and have a conversation with about different aspects of what we're doing. He came on board with me with what I get classing season 4, because seasons 1 and 2 were either me just rambling at the screen or my Red Shirt Geeks co-founder Patrick basically picking apart the movies, and then we had this wonderful thing happen where, and I say wonderful in air quotes, where somebody had decided to do a very ambitious Star Trek fan film and became the butt of every single joke because he I won't say what he did because it's all alleged, but let's just say that it left the fallout from that event left a very bitter taste in people's mouths. And so I kind of I started off season 3 with this massive swear-filled rant about this guy. And I was like, I'm like, oh, I gotta get away from this. This has become toxic. I like my fandom for Star Trek had become toxic, and I started to hate the one thing that I had loved the most when it came to my fandoms. So I did like another couple of episodes for different things, and I thought, no, I got to step away from this because I'm going to become very anti everything when it comes to Star Trek, and I didn't want to do that because it torpedoed my love for the franchise. So I took a break, and then when I met Brandon and we decided to pick it up and do it together, I just kind of said, you know what, we're just going to start with a new season, and we are now, I believe, at 11 episodes for season 4, which is phenomenal. And we've had a great run so far. We've been talking about, mostly been doing episode recaps of Picard and Strange New Worlds. But as we kind of get more into the groove and prepare to do a full, like, season of 5 when we get to it, we'll be moving on to other topics. Like we'll talk about, like we're doing now. We're not doing just an episode recap, but we're talking about the messages that are communicated in these episodes. And yeah, that's kind of where we're taking it right now.
You guys familiar with the Mission Log podcast, the Roddenberry Productions?
I've heard of it. I haven't watched it.
I haven't seen it.
I'm sorry, I haven't listened to it. So
they've been going through. It's probably 4 or 5 years in the running now. Every single episode of Star Trek ever produced, like all the way back to the original series. Like, so just they'll do one episode a week. So it's like 50 odd episodes of the podcast a year. So they can get through 2-3 seasons of a series in a year. But yeah, I think I was listening to it pretty regularly for a while there, but yeah, it's I believe it is Rod Roddenberry. I think Gene's son, I believe, is the one who kind of got it going and is like the executive producer.
Yeah, he took up the mantle.
Yeah, and they but with the podcast they kind of do that where, I mean, they'll do a recap, they'll do trivia, but then they get into, like, I think the way they put it is the morals, messages, and meanings, and then they'll talk about, does this still hold up? Like, say they'll even get into things like the production value from the 80s, from a set on TNG, in season 1, whatever, like, does it hold up? Yes, no. but do the ethics that they discuss in this, does that hold up, or et cetera, and it's pretty cool. And I like that approach to, like, digging a little deeper. It's not just nerding out about I don't know. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people that really love Star Trek get into it for. It feels like to me like some of the messages that are in it, and just I don't know, they managed to address so many different important topics.
It was just trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
I listened, just recently finished listening to the audiobook of Will Wheaton's Still Just a Geek. And one thing that he kind of touched on, and this is something that I've always loved about Star Trek, is that Gene Roddenberry had a wonderful way of slipping social topics by the censors. Because he's like, you can't talk about that. You can't talk about the Vietnam War. You can't talk about racism. You can't talk about civil rights. That's a hotbed of top. You can't do that. We'll get, they'll pull us off the air. And so he does an episode, where, 2 aliens, one who's black on one side and white on the other, and the reverse on the other one. And suddenly it becomes this very thinly veiled episode talking about racism. And then there's, the episode, I want to say, forgive me if I get the title wrong, but I think it's called This Little War. It was social commentary on the Vietnam War, because it was basically people getting involved in a conflict that really they had no business being in, which is exactly where we were in the United States in the late 60s, early 70s. We were in a police action in a foreign country that we had no business being in, because we were like, hey, well, we think some other people we don't like are getting involved. We better get involved. Yeah. But it had no, like, when I say we had no business being involved, I mean so much that it wasn't a direct conflict. Like, nobody had declared war on the United States and vice versa. We were in the middle of a conflict between 2 other parties. And which actually kind of is a little bit apropos for today, given that we are recording this episode on Memorial Day. But again, one thing that's wonderful about Star Trek is they are able to really touch on these socio-political topics that we all talk about in closed circles, but seem to become taboo when you discuss them in public.
Oh man, yeah, and the episode we'll be discussing in a little bit here is certainly no exception. Like, it's always been one of my favorite episodes of TNG, but rewatching it, I believe it was Saturday, I rewatched it, and it's like, wow, this is not only is it just so well written and well acted, but like part of what makes it so is that it masterfully deals with like very difficult ethical issues. Like it addresses Picard's PTSD, and it addresses like wartime ethics, like Geneva Convention type stuff. Just it's and such in such an entertaining and engaging way too. And that to me, like that's what Star Trek is best at. And obviously every series has their clunker episodes. Like what was the one in TNG? Was it Evolution, where they're all like changing into into monsters or whatever?
Yeah, they're back into like lizards and
or the infamous Justice episode.
Oh
yeah.
Well, let us not gloss over
the ghost,
the episode from the first season, which the wonderful thing is I think I blinked its title out, but it's the Code of Honor. Oh, sorry. We all want to forget that one, but that is the episode where I think somebody phoned in the script for that one, because they all missed it completely how blatantly racist the entire storyline was, especially and also where they treated the people of this planet as, I guess, almost caricatured African society, and I'm sure they didn't mean to do it, but they ultimately just poked fun at an entire culture on international TV. They have these swing and a miss episodes. They have the filler episodes like the Shades of Grey episode, which was the season 2 finale, where they weren't even sure that they were going to actually get renewed for a third season. So they ended. They were basically writing it in a way that if they canceled the series, that they wouldn't get left with a cliffhanger. So they had the flashback, the episode where Riker gets stung by this creature on a planet, and in order to save his life, we get to watch an hour's worth of flashback.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Brandon. While we're still in the segment here, I was gonna ask this question to both of you, but I'll pose it to you first. Like, what was your first exposure to Star Trek, or your earliest Star Trek memories? Like, how'd you come to start watching it?
It was probably the motion picture. My dad and my uncle were like huge Star Trek fans. They had watched the original series, and my dad loved the motion picture. And so like if it was ever on TV, we would watch it. And then TNG came out, and that was my Star Trek. That was like the one that I loved the most was TNG. I remember watching that as a kid. Cause I was like, when did it air? It aired in 86, I think, or 88.
TNG started 87.
Yeah.
87. Yeah. So I was 9 when it came out. So I was like right at that perfect age. Like, mostly my dad and my uncle. Mostly my uncle. My uncle's a huge fan. Like him and I still, to this day, I was just hanging out with him Sunday, and on Saturday, and we were talking about Star Trek. We were talking about Wrath of Khan. So it's like, so it would have been my uncle. We watched all the movies. Like whenever we got together or hung out as a family, like he would put on all the movies. Of course, his favorites were the original cast, the original movies, or all the new movies that they made with Kirk and everyone. So I watched a lot of those. But TNG, I watched that as a kid. That was my series, Picard. So that's where my love of Star Trek came from.
Nice. How about you, Lars? Like, how'd you first get introduced to Star Trek?
Well, mine is probably the same story that a lot of middle-aged men would say these days, and that is, I'm I was born in the mid 70s. And, I can remember from, like 3 or 4 years old watching reruns of the original series with my father. And I had always kind of, loved Star Trek as a franchise, as I was growing up. But I kind of drifted away from it a little bit when in my sort of my early teen years. And I actually almost missed the entire first season of TNG because I was one of those guys who went home on Friday night and instead of watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, I watched Perfect Strangers. and
Balky.
Yeah, cousin Laddie and Balky. And a friend of mine at school was like, "Hey man, have you been watching that new Star Trek show?" I'm like, "What new Star Trek show?" "Oh, it's called The Next Generation." I'm like, "No." He's like, "Dude, you gotta watch it." And of course I'm thinking, now I look back on it, I'm like, So, but
might be a blessing in disguise that you missed most of the first season.
Yeah, but the thing is, going forward, like from that point, like I started watching it. I think I caught it. I caught it towards the end of the first season, and then I was able over the summer. I was able to catch up the entire first season in reruns. For you kids out there, there was a thing called reruns where you didn't have a DVR and. Yep. Excuse me. You didn't have a DVR. You didn't have on-demand programming. You either watched it
or you missed it,
or you missed it. And if you're lucky, you got to catch up on over the summer during reruns. And that was for me. That was like after I went back and watched the first season, as bad as the writing was, and how it was a lot of recycled stuff, and and how we had young Will Wheat saying lines like, "We're Starfleet, we don't lie."
Or like that episode. It was somewhere in the first season. I referenced that earlier when I was mentioning you look like Will Wheaton a little bit. Brandon is like the first half of the episode. Everyone who's referencing Wesley Crusher is calling him the boy.
The boy.
Picard's like, where's the boy? It's like Riker's like, the boy's over there. No, I was like, his name is Wesley. Like, come on,
man.
It's like the boy. I was like,
I understand you have 1,200 people to look after, but you can remember one, especially since he's the son of your best friend.
Yes.
Oh, exactly. Whose death you're responsible for. No.
Yeah, exactly. So for I always go back. The Next Generation is still my favorite series to watch. I can watch it anywhere. I can pick up any season anywhere and just roll through it and be happy. That's kind of my Star Trek happy place.
Oh man! And in our last minute here, this segment, I'll say it similar for me. Like I was born in the early '80s, and I don't remember exactly when, but it was sometime probably late '80s in that range, early '90s. And similar to you guys, like I watched it with my dad. My dad's always been a sci-fi fan. Like he grew up during this, the space race and everything as a kid. So he just like loved astronomy and stuff and science fiction. And of course, he saw the original Star Trek on its first run, kind of thing. And so yeah, obviously TNG when it came out, he was watching that pretty much every week. So I do remember catching a few episodes with him. But yeah, it's like, yeah, that's a cool touch point. And just not too long ago, I started rewatching the series a little bit with my dad, and it's been in fact, we need to get back to that. It's still to this day is the only series I own the entire thing on Blu-ray. That's it. I don't have any other series in full. That's the one.
Nice.
Can't afford to buy any others, to be honest with you. But that's if I'm gonna buy one, I was like, that's it. This episode is brought to you in association with the Red Shirt Geeks, the home of Old Men Gaming and Treknicity. Join them weekly as they play games, talk about all things geek, and share in the wonders of all our fandoms. Visit them at redshirtgeeks.tv, on Twitch at redshirtgeeks, and on Instagram at redshirtgeeks and at Treknicity. And we are back. So we're going to jump right into our main topic for this episode, and that is the Star Trek The Next Generation Season 5 episode, I, Borg. So before we talk about our impressions and what we thought about the episode, I'm going to read a little synopsis here on imdb.com. So it says, the Enterprise finds a lone Borg drone separated from the collective and brings him aboard. The drone begins to reassert his individuality, but his presence causes differing levels of fear and sympathy from various crew members. This episode is directed by Robert Letterman, writers Gene Roddenberry, Renee Echevarria, and Brannon Braga. And obviously the main cast is there for it. I believe everybody from the main cast is in the episode at different points, and then with a special guest, Jonathan Del Arco as Third of Five, aka Hugh. So that's just a little bit about.
Another fun fact, it aired in May of 92, which means this was 30 years ago.
Dang. Well, that's perfect. I didn't even think about that.
And the funny thing is, if you guys want to know just how old I am, I graduated on this day 30 years ago.
Nice. Let's see, 30 years. I was 9, I believe.
I graduated 3 years after you, Lars.
So yeah, we're not all too far apart, but a little bit of a spread there.
But just something to take away from what you just read out there. One of the names on there being Brannon Braga. Big has been has been highly involved in Star Trek from TNG as a writer all the way up to a showrunner in Enterprise. So he's, like him or not, he's got quite a pedigree with Star Trek.
Yeah,
I've seen a number of behind the scenes interviews with him over the years, and he seems pretty cool. And, I don't know if I haven't paid attention if he's been as involved in some of the more recent stuff like Discovery or Picard, but I know, like you said, he was up until at least Enterprise.
I think he was done when Enterprise finished. He and Manny Koto finished out season 4 of Enterprise, and that was it. I don't think he's been involved, at least in a significant capacity, for any of the what were being dubbed New Trek series.
Yeah, maybe more just consulting role, if anything, kind of thing. Like, yeah, it is cool to see some of the TNG alums coming back to direct episodes. I mean, obviously Jonathan Frakes heavily involved. LeVar Burton, I've seen him pop up a few times on different episodes, and I don't know if they ever brought Gates McFadden. Like, she got to direct like her one episode back in TNG days, which ironically, I don't know if you guys have heard her talk about this. Like, she was the only cast member with directing experience, and yet somehow the men got first dibs on the
I think it's the chauvinist nature of the business that that existed for a long time until we started seeing more sexual equality appearing as we've seen sort of in the last few years.
It's kind of like the behind the scenes had to get caught up to the in front of the camera stuff, you know what I mean? Like, because there were definitely those messages in Star Trek itself, but I'm sad that it didn't always live up to that behind the scenes. But that's another topic for another day, as they say. Equality in Star Trek. If I ever do address that one, in addition to having you guys on, I definitely need to get some women on the podcast as well.
All just men talking about this.
No, it's like, let's talk about female equality in Star Trek. Three white men.
Three white guys. Wait a minute. No, hang on a second. Actually, it's funny you bring that up, because later in June, Brandon and I are going to be appearing on Twin Cities Trekkies podcast, and we are going to be we're not going to be talking about sexual equality, but we are going to be talking about diversity. So that's going to be interesting, because again, it's going to probably be 3 white guys talking about diversity in Star Trek. So I will certainly have to broaden my horizons just a little bit more, just so I don't sound like a blathering idiot.
Oh yeah, no, it's good to listen more and talk less and those kind of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, but yeah, so let's see. Borg. So I guess we'll start off with this question. Like, and I think I don't know if you did, Lars. I think each of us have rewatched it in preparation for or maybe it just had been recent enough that you're like, I got this. But
let's just say that I did.
I will say that you did. But anyway, like, do you guys just from your memories of it or from rewatching, like, did you have a scene that you thought stood out the most to you from the episode?
Well, if you don't mind, Brandon, I'll step in there and answer first. But the one thing, the one actual scene in this episode that struck me the most was at the very end, and that is when the drone from the Borg cube shows up to collect him, and just as they're beaming out, he looks over.
Yeah.
Like, to me, right there, that summed up the entire episode. That summed up the title of the episode. You couldn't say it more clearly than in that one moment.
Oh, no, that was so beautifully filmed too, because like enacted. It's like no words, just he gives a look and then Geordi reacts. And I don't know if they did double coverage on that and recorded their reaction at the same time. It'd be cool if they did. But yeah, brilliant acting on both of their parts, and directing too, by Mr. Letterman. But yeah, I agree. That was a powerful moment.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
Episode. How about you, Brandon?
The scenes I liked, there were definitely the ones between Picard and Guinan. I liked how initially they both were so angry with the Borg that they just wanted to get their revenge. Because like you said, Pete deals with PTSD. They both definitely have PTSD. She has it because the Borg wiped out her entire culture, her entire race almost. And then Picard because he was assimilated. But then there is that scene where he brought the Borg on board, and him and her are fencing, and she has to teach him. She teaches him a lesson where he says, like, well, we kind of felt sorry for him and we had to fix him up. And then like she feigns that her leg is hurting when they're fencing, and he's like, oh no, are you okay? And then she like stabs him in the stomach, and she's like, you felt sorry for me, didn't you? And see what that got you? Like, always trying to teach him some sort of lesson. But at that moment, it was a lesson of we need to do something bad. But obviously later on, they changed their minds. I just thought that was a good scene.
Oh man, yeah, I agree. And it's I think another Picard and Guinan scene, the one that stood out the most to me from the episode was the scene later on in his quarters. Sexy Picard with his with his chest hair showing. But no. I'll joking aside, like, honestly, I think it's fair to say one of the best scenes in TNG history. I think it's fair to say that, like, just powerful acting and writing there, and just the emotion of it. Where she, and obviously, any of you who haven't seen this episode yet, before we go any further, spoiler warning. Yeah, you've only had 30
You've had 30 years to watch it.
I think the spoiler warning is just a courtesy now.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like, where like Guinan, even though like you said, like she had it out for the Borg as well, was very wary and concerned about a lone Borg being on there. It says repeatedly, like, the rest of his people are going to come for him, which he's right about. They do eventually come. And but then Geordi challenges her, in that 10 forward scene, and to go and actually talk to him. And she does. And kind of, there's the humanization of Hugh there, like, where I believe both I think she did. I know Picard and Worf definitely referred to him as it.
I noticed that. Yeah, I wrote that.
I think Picard the longest, like, he up until that scene with Guinan, I think he was still calling Hugh it.
Yeah.
and and she challenges Picard there, and you can see the anger like underneath the surface, like because I mean Picard he gets a little bit that self-righteous anger sometimes, but you don't often see the very personal anger with him, and you definitely see it in that scene with Patrick Stewart, just like it's just like boiling under the surface there, and you see that, and yet he knows, he's like, damn it, she's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I wrote that down where he says, if you're going to use this person, he's like, damn it, it's a Borg. And she's like, if you're going to use this person, you should at least talk to him.
Yeah, I think one thing that most people gloss over is that the Borg don't recruit people. You know they don't have recruitment posters. Join the Borg, see the galaxy. It's every single creature or every single drone that is in the Borg collective has been conscripted, through assimilation.
Oh man, it's like if a colony of bees suddenly became colonizers, almost, it's like they sting you and you become one of them. It's like
right. And you can't turn around. Actually, District 9 is a really good, as much as I don't like that movie, it's a really good example of that same philosophy. And that is, you can't judge based on what happens to you. You can't turn around and judge somebody based on something something that was done to them without their consent. You almost can compare Picard's feelings towards Hugh as Kirk does to the Klingons, especially in Star Trek 6. Because Spock's like, what do we do? And it's like, well, don't trust them, don't believe them, don't trust them.
Yeah. Let them die.
And it's like, again, you look at how we have dehumanized the Borg, because they are, for the most part, from what we observe, mindless automatons. And so it's easy to make them the bad guy. You're like, it doesn't matter what happens to them because they're just some nameless drone that has no feelings, has no attachments, has no personality. But in reality, you have to be sympathetic of the creature that was turned into this drone. And I think sort of referencing the Best of Both Worlds, I want to say part 2 episode. It might have been part 1. Forgive me if I'm soft on that one. But the part where Picard actually gets assimilated, you see him shed a single tear.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. I was like, the single tear. Yeah.
So the morality of this whole situation is, again, I know we're talking about a fictional story, but it has so many allegorical connections to us as humans that it is easy for us to vilify something we don't understand, or something we can only observe, on a 2-dimensional level. You can never truly understand what somebody goes through, even if you go through it yourself, because perspective is individual. And that's how they are able to turn around and, in a way, explore the other side of what it is to be a Borg, and of course the title is perfect for it. One of the most powerful episodes of the entire series, because they take something that for the better part of 3 seasons, it has been talked about in hush circles as that's the big bad wolf, that's the scary monster of Star Trek. And suddenly we're just like, what do you mean they're human? What do you mean they're, they had thoughts, feelings, they could be disconnected from the collective. What do you mean that we could have sympathy or even empathy for this person, this thing, this it? And it kind of turns the mirror right back on us and says, look at yourself, and then look at this.
Yeah, I had a couple notes on Picard here, like the the psychology here at play, with Picard's character throughout the course of this episode is fascinating to me. Like, is he, as you mentioned with Best of Both Worlds, like he was a person who was assimilated, then rescued, and just thinking about, and I wrote this down right after that scene that you cited a second ago, Brandon, where Guinan starts to say, I said, if you're going to use this person, and Picard interjects, he's like, it's not a person, damn it, it's a Borg, and just he like stands up. The dude's angry, and then I think I paused it and just was reflecting on that. It's like, it seems like, and I've seen this tendency just in my day-to-day interactions with people as well. Like, it seems like to protect himself from trauma on some level, like he was dehumanizing his abusers, his attackers, which is understandable, given what he suffered. But it's also interesting given that he himself was assimilated and then pulled out, was rescued in a sense from that he didn't. It's interesting that he didn't have more sympathy for Hugh or more compassion for Hugh, given that he had been through. I found that interesting.
That isn't, now that you mentioned it, I didn't even think about that, but that's totally true. Like, you would think that he would have more sympathy because he was pulled out of that and he knows what it's like to come back from being a Borg and being connected to the collective and being disconnected from it. And yeah, you would think he would have had more sympathy for him. Maybe that was like a missed opportunity for them, or maybe they felt they didn't have time to discuss that in the episode.
I honestly kind of like the fact, I like that you see some chinks in Jean-Luc's armor, if you will, pretty big chinks or holes in the armor, if you will, in this episode. And I just I think something I mentioned to you, Lars, in as we were like prepping and talking about our topic for this episode. One of the parallels that at least I was able to draw like out of that, and like you said, there's so many allegories, would be akin to someone getting pulled out of a really high control cult, because in a sense, like it's a little different, but like because there's a sense in which you at least feel like you have some agency going into a cult, but there's so much manipulation and coercion going on with these high control groups, whether it be your Heaven's Gate or your, Jim Jones, what have you, that you, in a sense, are getting assimilated. And then when you are pulled in, like you get love bombed, you get like surrounded and like become part of the family, quote unquote. But if you ever try to leave, I think you even talks about that at one point, like no one leaves the Borg. I think he even says that. And it just made me think of that. It's like, and I've talked to a number of people over the years who have left groups like that, and I could see where they could almost be like, maybe in a sense, to protect yourself from getting sucked back in to the cult, because you see Picard wrestle with that. I think even in First Contact, some like the temptation to go back, like when he's interacting with the Queen, like maybe on some level the dehumanization, or like they're the enemy now, is almost to protect himself from that. I don't know, just some thoughts I had on it, like some parallels that I, in my personal experience, drew. I was like,
seems tempted to do that, because it's like you said, like to go back into that collective where you don't really have to think for yourself anymore, and you just like, everyone's surrounding you, loving you, and everyone's like thinking the exact same thing that you're thinking, and like there's probably some sort of freedom in that where you can just let go and let someone else take control.
Well, the funny thing you see is that Picard never really loses that sensibility or that attitude or perspective on the Borg from the time he was assimilated, because he likes to think that he has this level of, evolved humanity. And it's a huge point of discussion in Star Trek First Contact when Lily takes him to task for killing Ensign Lynch in the holodeck, and she's turns it into the whole Captain Ahab chasing Moby Dick sort of allegory.
Like she's his Guinan in that movie.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you guys talk about how it was interesting how he didn't have more sympathy for Hugh because he was assimilated himself and was able to be extracted from the collective, I think he sees himself as a little bit superior to like he still sees Hugh as just a thing. He doesn't, and that's the whole thing, is he learns to a certain degree that, this drone was a living creature with thoughts and feelings and, and a life prior to becoming a drone. I mean, yes, technically, Hugh was a young Borg, and they describe him as an adolescent. So I imagine he didn't have much of a life beforehand, but still you would think that he would have more understanding. But then again, they do a pretty good job of, despite the fact that he does realize the so-called error of his ways, going forward, he still maintains that burned in, I guess, perspective or attitude towards the Borg. You can kind of explain it however you want. Oh, it's just, it's the writers decided to do this way, but whatever. And even if it was by accident and not even by design, it still flows very well and still lends gravitas to Captain Picard as a character, because he will always remember that, and he will always be haunted by it. And no matter what his morals tell him, his moral compass says, this is a creature, we cannot use him for genocide. He still is going to have that, they turned me into one of them against my will. And I endured torture, the likes of that most people will never see in their entire life. So you're damn right I'm going to have that attitude. Despite him to be able to make the right choice in the end of this episode, they still allowed him to carry that prejudice.
That's a good point. I was actually thinking about that yesterday. Like, is that, I have to admit, like, I know this is not necessarily true for a lot of TNG fans, but First Contact was not my favorite TNG movie. I think in part for that reason of, like, it felt a bit like Picard's character went backwards. Like, especially after rewatching this episode, I'm like, seemed like he made a big stride.
Yeah.
But just in hearing you talking about that, Lars, I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's a little bit more like what real humans are like. Because we may make strides and then go backwards again. That happens.
Yeah.
To real humans, it's like we don't have this just like constant upward progression of moral progress. Nobody's life is really like that.
We slip back into our old ways, even if we don't mean to do it.
Yes. Star Trek has always been a neo-utopian society, or it is portrayed a neo-utopian society. However, you can never have order without chaos. You can never have peace without conflict. And you think about it this way, I think for the most part that Picard was fine. Like he was okay with doing what he had to do, what he felt was right for humanity or for the safety of the Federation. But ultimately, when he decides to do the right thing and send him home with the hopes that what he was able to achieve as far as consciousness goes, he would be able to take that back. And of course, we do see that he did have an effect on the Borg as a society when you go back and watch the two-parter episode Descent later on. And then, of course, Jonathan Del Arco makes an appearance in Picard season 1 as Hugh, which was great as well, as a completely a de-assimilated or unassimilated Borg. So you get to see a lot of that. But when you talk about how a character can still carry a prejudice, when you look at First Contact again, you see that when he has that sort of dream within a dream sequence there at the beginning when he's thinking he's still in the Borg collective and all this stuff, and they tell him, like, the admiral calls him and says, oh yeah, no, it's the Borg, and he's even cool with that and knowing what he has to do until I tell him you can't go and fight the Borg. You can't go because, and it's the same way. And if you want to liken it to like what we see in our everyday lives, it's like saying, let's say you commit a minor crime in your youth. You're 18 years old. You do something stupid. You pay your debt to society, and let's say 40 years later, people are still holding that against you. I think that's where that comes in. And I think in a way, Picard did that to Hugh. Like, he's like, you did this because you're a Borg. Not this was done to you and now you're a Borg. It is, you did it because you are one, and I'm going to hold it against you. And we see that, and again, we see that play out further down the line.
Yeah, and some other real world analogies that came to mind, like, and this one's a bit uncomfortable, but like, think about back in the 40s, 30s, 40s, some of the 18-year-old Nazi soldiers, some of these guys, like, not all of them were there because they were like, yeah, like, I'm in with Hitler's cause. Like, some of them were probably scared shitless and just kind of going along to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Others, I mean, Hitler was in a sense like a cult leader. Others were just like kind of assimilated in a sense into that and just caught up in the war machine. And I'm going to make a Lord of the Rings reference here. different realm of nerddom. But I think of it's a really powerful moment in I believe it's the Two Towers, where this is the film I'm referencing, like, where Faramir looks down at an enemy that he had just shot. It's his job, he's protecting the borders for Gondor, but he killed one of the soldiers, and he looks down and just comments like, I wonder what drove this young man to come out here, like what lies were told to him, kind of thing. And it's just thinking about it, like I said, it's uncomfortable because it's easier to just be like, oh, all Nazis were just this monolithic evil.
Yeah.
But it's more complicated than that in real life,
Yeah, that's what they say. He was a very charismatic leader. Like, he was like a cult leader. Like, people wanted to follow him when he talked to them. And it's like, people go down that road, and like you said. Yeah.
But again, to tie in what you're saying to what we're talking about, most people don't realize that soldiers who were in the Wehrmacht or in the Luftwaffe were Nazis. They were just German soldiers. They were fighting for their country. They believed what they were told, and they just went off to war. And there were, yes, of course, there were people who were part of the Nazi party, and they went along with everything. They bought a hook, line, and sinker. But again, not everybody went along who fought were I guess, to make a Jim Jones reference, they weren't drinking the Kool-Aid. They were just fighting for national pride, because they had been convinced that these people were coming to destroy their livelihood for no good reason. And yeah, we see the same thing here. Like, it's, I think one of the coolest things that they were able to do with the Borg as a society later on, and especially in Picard season 2, is show that no matter how the society evolves or grows or continues, there is, or how they operate, there's still that opportunity for them to grow out of that one-dimensional thinking that they've been stuck in. The Borg queens have always said, we don't adapt, we assimilate. We take everything. We don't evolve as a species. We just take it all in and just add it to the pile and keep on moving.
Yeah.
And this episode, I feel, is like the seed for that story, or the seed for that eventuality.
Yeah, and that's spoiler warning here for those who haven't seen Picard season 2, much more recent. But yeah, that was something I wanted to tie into a bit, like with what happened with Girardi and like her conversations with the Borg Queen, and like the Borg Queen obviously being in a very unique situation where she was completely cut off from all of her collective and alone.
Yeah, just so like Hugh.
Yeah, like Hugh. So in a sense was in the most vulnerable state that she may have ever been in, but also receptive to hearing a different message or a different proposition, like the one that Girardi makes there.
Yeah, and it's exact same situation that happened with Hugh. That Borg turned into something else, something different from where it started, just like Hugh.
It had to evolve, without doing so, they would have never been able to continue on as a society. I won't call them a species because they are a melting pot, but as a society, they had, we
live in a society. Sorry.
Oh man,
had to throw a Seinfeld in.
There we go. Where'd it go?
Sorry, keep going.
But you're but actually again, I think what we've seen now, that story was the seed of the eventuality that came to be. The Borg did eventually evolve, but it wouldn't have happened if these events had not taken place beforehand.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, guys, we got about 4 minutes left here. I guess I wanted to finish with talking about kind of the penultimate scene where in the episode where Picard brings Hugh into his ready room, and they have this conversation where it didn't seem like to me like Picard planned on role playing as Locutus in there, but when Hugh recognizes him, he's like, Locutus. Picard realizes the opportunity there and presses his advantage in a sense, while also that being like an amazing test for Hugh. It's like him like taking on the role of Locutus and trying to push Hugh to adhere to the Borg doctrine, if you will, of like assimilation, resistance is futile. But then through that, like you see Hugh's, I don't know if Hugh is actually a human or not. I don't recall what his species was.
I believe he's human.
Is he human? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you see his humanity come to the surface, in particular in his concern for Geordi, his friend. And just wanted to give you guys a chance to comment real quick on that penultimate scene there.
I'll let you go ahead. And Brandon, I've been dominating the conversation.
Yeah, it's like his it's Picard's like Turing test, like figuring out, is this person a Borg or is it a human? Yeah, I mean, it was a great scene. It was just like him trying to figure out if he is still a Borg, like he thought he was, but then he turned out he wasn't. He was turning into something new, turning into something more. Had, like you said, he cared for somebody else. It showed that he could evolve. It showed that he cared for somebody, not himself, not for the collective. It was a great scene. Lars,
my last comment is that he guined him like wait a minute, that was really good what you did there. I'm going to use that over here. And it was just, again, you got a real quick chance for him to say, okay, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to test whether or not my thinking is right or wrong. And, he used it exceptionally effectively. And as such, he was able to make the right decision.
Yeah, and I actually wrote down, I think, the whole scene. I was like, damn, this is such good writing. Like, I'll just close with a little bit of it here, and then we'll wrap up. But like Hugh asks Picard is like, must he's talking about the assimilation. Must Geordi be assimilated? Picard's like, yes. He does not wish it. Then he will die. No, Geordi must not die. Geordi is a friend. And Picard comes back very strong. He's like, you will assist us to assimilate this vessel. You are Borg. You will assist us. And here's the bomb. He was like, I will not. And it just catches Picard. He's like, what did you say?
Yeah.
Like what did you say?
I will not assist you. And I actually wrote down here, boom. It's like,
yeah.
Mic dropped.
Mic dropped.
Yeah,
you know,
seriously.
You exit stage left. Peace out, Borg love.
then at the very end, he's like, I am Hugh.
Beautiful way to end the episode, or end that scene and lead us to the end of the episode.
Speaking of end of episode, I'm gonna wrap this up, guys. Thank you so much for coming on, and yeah, like let's do this again sometime. I love Star Trek, so
yeah, thanks for having us. It was fun.
Absolutely,
I love all things nerds. So
yes, especially Star Trek. All right, guys.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Live long and prosper.
You too.
Hey, nerds. So thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of the Irreverent Nerds podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, as always, you can go check us out on Instagram. That's at irreverent_nerds, plural. That's at irreverent_nerds. We have a Facebook fan page. It's just called The Irreverent Nerds. We're also on YouTube. I believe it's still currently Irreverent Nerd. Plan to change that eventually to the plural form, but if you look up either one, you should be able to find us there. If you'd like to leave a voice message to be included in a future episode, go to anchor.fm/irreverent nerds, and there should be a link there to leave a message. Also, if you'd like to support us, you could do so for 99 cents a month, $4.99 a month, or even $9.99 a month. We'd be really grateful. The link is in the same spot as the voice message there, the anchor.fm. So, until next time, my fellow nerds, live long and prosper.